What happened in the last 24 hours globally and locally? This is Flash News, the program where we tell it all. I'm Karolina Pańczkowska. Welcome. There will be no summit between the European Union and Russia. After a strong objection from Poland, among others, the EU leaders rejected the proposal of France and Germany. Kremlin's aggressive actions were one of the main topics of the summit in Brussels that ended today.
If you cross a borderline, I'll be fired. If you don't change the course, I'll be fired.
The crew of the British ship HMS Defender heard threats of shooting from the Russians. The vessel was entering internationally recognized Ukrainian waters. The Russians occupying Crimea called it, contrary to fact, a violation of their territory.
The Royal Navy and the UK will always call out states that do not follow international order.
The Kremlin has threatened to bomb British ships if they re-enter waters allegedly belonging to Russia. This is yet another provocative behavior by Moscow in recent times. Russia's aggressive actions were the subject of a summit of EU leaders. Its participants were shocked by the proposal of France and Germany to hold a joint summit of the EU with Vladimir Putin. Such meetings have been suspended since the Russian occupation of Crimea began in 2014. However, the leaders of Poland and the Baltic states managed to block the idea of inviting Putin to Brussels. It had to be explained long and hard that we cannot reward President Putin for pursuing his forward and confrontational policies. The EU leaders had a heated discussion on this issue. At the end of it, German Chancellor Angela Merkel admitted that she felt disappointed with this turn of events. Personally, I would have liked a bolder step, but that's fine too, and we'll keep working on it. The political portal devoted to European politics assessed that the leaders of Poland, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia humiliated Germany and France with their arguments. Berlin and Paris' drive for a new reset in relations with Moscow is a mixture of political naivety and a desire to pursue common interests. Nord Stream 2, for example. Therefore, despite detaining political prisoners like Alexei Navalny, supporting the Lukashenko regime and, by all indications, conducting cyber attacks, Vladimir Putin may feel that he has impunity.
After nearly 20 years, the NATO mission in Afghanistan is coming to an end. As a result, the first Polish soldiers are back home for good. We gain not only experience but also respect of our allies, as Commander of SIS.
In 2002, Poles went to war responding to the call of the Americans and NATO after the attacks of the 11th of September 2001. They went to Afghanistan to ensure control and patrol. They were forced to reach for their weapons thousands of times. They returned from Afghanistan with a shield, completing the largest NATO operation in history. The homeland welcomes you. Everyone is happy to come home. A certain period of NATO history is closing. A certain period of Poland's recent history is also closing. Over the past 20 years, more than 30,000 Polish soldiers have gained invaluable experience in Afghanistan, participating first in the ISAF operation. It represented the greatest challenge to the Polish armed forces after World War II, and since 2015 in a consulting and training operation. We are active wherever the North Atlantic Treaty Organization needs us. In Afghanistan, 44 Poles were killed and 361 wounded. We remember them. An expression of that remembrance is the Veterans Act, which was amended 2 years ago, significantly expanding support for veterans and their families. In Afghanistan, Poland earned the respect of our allies. We were entrusted with strategic tasks. Not only the training of the Afghan security forces, but I'm talking about special forces. We were really very high up there. The longest-serving commander in Afghanistan was General Raymond Andrzejczak, who today was appointed by President Andrzej Duda for a second term as the Chief of General Staff of the Polish Army. This is one of the most important appointments handed out by the President. An appointment that in the hour of test may determine the security or even the continued existence of the state, and what the fate of the citizens will be next. Among the security priorities, General Andrzejczak outlined cooperation with NATO, strengthening the eastern flank and relations with the Baltic states, but also cybersecurity.
In Flash News, we move overseas as former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison for murder of George Floyd back in May 2020. Shortly before the conviction, Chauvin offers condolences to Floyd's relatives.
I wanted to know from the man himself, why? What were you thinking? What was going through your head when you had your knee on my brother's neck? Why, when you knew that he posed no threat anymore, he was handcuffed, why you didn't at least get up? Why you stayed there?
I want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some some peace of mind.
Mr. Chauvin, as to count one, based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd.
And now let's talk about the weather Armageddon in the Czech Republic. A powerful tornado passed throughout southern Moravia. There are at least 5 deaths, hundreds injured, and massive damages. Approximately 75,000 people are without electricity, and the losses are estimated at 60 million euros at least.
These pictures show how powerful this tornado was. The element destroyed everything in its path, and the accompanying winds reached speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour. We avoided death. It all happened in a minute. 5 people were killed and about 200 injured. Many towns turned into rubble with destroyed houses and cars. Czech media are writing about an apocalypse. You know what the worst thing is? You look at it on TV in Oklahoma and so on in America, and you think this can't happen to us in the Czech Republic, and here you are in South Moravia and suddenly this. People were evacuated from damaged houses. Some villages were cut off from the world. I can't even describe it. It was like being in a war zone. Everything was spinning and flying through the air. It took off the roof of us. It is normal for a piece of stone to fly away when strong wind blows, but the destruction of an entire village? It may cost several hundred million crowns to cover the losses caused by the natural disaster. Austrian, Slovaks and Polish firefighters and several brigades have rushed to help the Czechs. They will be assisting in removing the effects of these windstorms, which is mainly clearing communication routes, structural elements. There are currently 550 firefighters working in the area where the tornado passed through. Financial and material collections are being organized across the country.
The severe weather conditions brought winds and large hail also in Poland. Last night, firemen intervened for thousands times and 860 buildings were damaged. The village of Librantowa in Lesser Poland suffered the most.
This is how Librantowa near Nowy Sącz looks like after the whirlwind. Roofs and windows are really exceptional in the air. Residents are devastated. It was a moment and nothing was there. People have houses that can be demolished. More than 70 homes are severely damaged. That's why the help of neighbors and firefighters is invaluable. We will be going from house to house and ask what people need. The trees, sheet metals are scattered, and we're going to try to embrace that. There are residents coming in one to help the other. The Prime Minister assured the residents of help. Also, aid for the reconstruction of residential buildings for repairs in the amount of up to 100,000 zlotys or 200,000 zlotys, depending on the estimated losses, will be provided to residents as soon as possible. Not only in Librantowa was it so terrible. It thundered and rained throughout Lesser Poland and Mazovia. In Silesia, hail the size of golf balls broke windows. The weather continues to be unsettled. In eastern Poland, there is still a warning for thunderstorms of the 2nd degree. Podlasie, Subcarpathia, Lubelszczyzna. There we can expect intense weather phenomena.
And Flash News now, we are back with the coronavirus update. In Poland, the number of people fully vaccinated against COVID-19 has exceeded 12 million. This is a lot, but still not enough to talk about the so-called herd immunity. Currently, the greatest fears throughout Europe are raised by Delta, which is a much more infectious variant of the coronavirus.
In Poland, 133 new cases of coronavirus infection have been reported in the last 24 hours, but this should not leave people assured. We are seeing some downward momentum in terms of interest in vaccination. That is why the campaign to call people who have not yet been vaccinated is launched. In the near future, such a phone call is to be received by 1 million people. We want to give them the opportunity. They won't have to take practically any step, just answer the question, and already the consultant on the hotline will make an appointment for such a patient directly. Vaccination provides a high level of protection against severe coronavirus disease, including for its Indian variant, which is currently of greatest concern. The vaccines recently tested by Pfizer and by AstraZeneca are also effective against these mutations. This Delta mutation that is starting to dominate at the moment if we look at European countries. To give the vaccination campaign even more momentum, the National Vaccination Program lottery will be launched on the 1st of July.
Economy now. The first investment connected with the crosscut of the Vistula split is ready, as today drivers can use the South Bridge over the shipping channel, which is currently under construction. Soon, a second bridge will also be built. The Vistula split crossing is one of the key investments increasing Poland's sovereignty.
A replica of a pre-war Polish passenger car was the first vehicle to drive over a modern bridge constructed over the Vistula spit. Just a year ago we saw the remnants of logging, and now we have a new land road. This is one of two bridges over the shipping channel. When ships pass through the spit, one of the bridges will always be open to allow cars to pass through. Next year we will be able to meet and admire the first ship that will go through the waterway. The cross-section of the spit, which started in 2019, is one of the investments that will increase Poland's economic sovereignty. Another is the ongoing expansion of the LNG port in Świnoujście or the planned construction of the floating gas port. In Ostrołęka, Orlen will build an ecological power plant. We signed an annex changing the coal-fired power plant. We annexed it to build a gas-fired power plant. The National Bank of Poland wants to become involved in energy investments, wanting to co-finance nuclear power projects.
45 years ago, protests began in Radom, Ursus and Płock. The immediate cause was the announcement of food price increases. It was the June strikes that started the political changes in Poland.
Stanisław Kowalski was a well-known athlete in Radom in the 1970s. In June 1976, he joined thousands of people who took to the streets to protest against rising food prices. The citizens' militia ZOMO pacified the demonstrators, and Stanisław Kowalski was imprisoned. I had a stroke on my lungs. I was on the health track after beatings. This was the price of defying the authorities, who a few days earlier had unexpectedly announced drastic increases. Suddenly, it appears that the authorities intend to raise the prices of meat by nearly 70%, rice by 150%, sugar by 200%, and other food items as well. Over 100 workplaces across Poland stood down. Over 80,000 people went on strike. Edward Gierek, who headed the PZPR party, condemned the protesters. The more words of blasphemy against them, the better for the cause. But despite the brutal suppression of protests and years of repression of their participants, it was the June strikes that opened the road to freedom for Poland and the countries of the Eastern Bloc and laid the foundations for solidarity. This spark of solidarity ignited. There was hope for all the enslaved in the entire Soviet Union.
You're watching Flash News, and what's up next? For many students, this is the best day of the year, the end of school year. And this one was particularly difficult due to pandemic and remote learning. Nevertheless, it was not lost. The Polish students now have more than 2 months of rest to go back to school on September the 1st.
School is over. More than 4 million students begin summer vacation. It's such a relaxing feeling to finally be able to relax and have those free days already. This year has been exceptionally difficult. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, students spent most of their time at home in front of their computers for remote lessons. Sometimes it got so bad that if we were yelling, our teacher couldn't hear anything in front of the computer. Not only students, but also teachers had to acquire new knowledge this year. They very quickly acquired the new skills needed to remotely teach these classes. It was only a few weeks ago, at the end of May, that everyone returned to the school walls. It was an extremely important time to rebuild the community, or at least in part, at least try to rebuild relationships between students, rebuild connections between students and teachers, and get back to normality. That's why some people had not enough school. I don't want these vacations because I can honestly say I would have stayed another month to get to know and talk to people. Remote learning and lack of contact with peers unfortunately has its negative effects, especially psychological. The Polish Ministry of Education and Science has prepared a special plan for the new school year. We prepared special pedagogical and psychological recommendations, which of course we were aware of. The teachers knew as well, but such supporting one, like how to accommodate children and young people after this difficult time of being in remote learning, being in isolation. Now everyone will have time to recharge their batteries and hopefully enter the normal learning mode with renewed vigor from the 1st of September.
And talking about vacation, crowds in the streets, kilometers-long queues to museum, beaches filled to the brim. This image of tourism disappeared back then in the outbreak of the pandemic. It turns out, however, that some places do not really miss the past at all, and the difficult time has made them reflect on the future of tourism.
Tourists are returning to Venice, and with them the big question of what comes next. UNESCO has just recommended that Venice be placed on the World Heritage at Risk list. The city has prepared a plan to welcome visitors back after the break. The plan includes controlling the arrival of one-day travelers, the number of private apartments available for foreign to tourists, and the protection of Venetian craftsmen. Ibiza is at a similar crossroads. The island is looking for a balance between its famous nightlife and the desire to promote tourism close to nature. Marilyn Monroe was a great star. Such is the likeness of the actress, which returned to Palm Springs, California from New Jersey after 7 years. The statue of the actress has both ardent supporters and opponents. The former say that Monroe's statue is a landmark for their city, as the Eiffel Tower is for Paris. However, a lot of people do not like the way the icon of pop culture has been immortalized. The players, the umpires, the rackets change, but the tradition is still the same. It is strawberries, an integral part of the Wimbledon tennis tournament. The custom of enjoying these fruits during matches dates back to Victorian times. For 3 decades, the strawberries have come from a farm near Maidstone in Kent, for which the Wimbledon order is the most important of the year. Spectators at the tournament eat over 20 tons of strawberries plus whipped cream. Simply an unbeatable dessert. Full of skyscrapers, Hong Kong is a city of the future. However, Tony Lei and Maggie Chen definitely chose the past. Their studio is a time machine to the artist's childhood. They were young then, so they recreate the past world on a micro scale. They rely on their own memories and those of their parents. They save them from oblivion as more and more historical buildings in Hong Kong are forced to give way to modernity.
That's everything that we prepared for you. Thank you very much for staying with us. We see each other tomorrow, same time on Flash News. Goodbye.